The Panthers bench Bryce Young. Tua Tagovailoa goes on IR with his concussion. And which teams off to a slow start are in the biggest trouble? Hey, everyone. Welcome to NFL This Week. Rob Wong, joined alongside by Postmedia's Paul Chapman. And Paul, a pretty surprising decision made by the Panthers the other day as they have decided to bench Bryce Young, the former number one overall pick. Now, it hasn't been a particularly good start to the season, so you can definitely understand why the 0-2 Panthers are choosing to do this. But ultimately, for his future and for the future of this franchise, is this the right move?
I think it has to be, Rob, because there's no improvement. And if anything, it was getting worse over, how he looked last year. And he had such a rough year last year. There's been an awful lot of hand-wringing by, in particular, draft analysts about how did we get this so wrong. I think you can look at the college system and you look at a team like Alabama that is running up 60 points on, East Tennessee State or whoever they're playing, and everyone looks good. And Alabama always had a stacked lineup, so you're playing with really good players. Then you get to the NFL, and the competition leap is just off the charts, and the Panthers don't have much around them. So I think if you want to salvage anything for Bryce Young, I would hope this move is being done to let him step back, take a beat, take the pressure off. I mean, it can't be good for your ego to get benched for Andy Dalton. And Andy Dalton had some good years earlier, but he's the prototypical journeyman quarterback. What I hope hasn't been the case, Rob, is that if you look at the Panthers' schedule, I mean, they got the Raiders, who had a shocking win last week in Baltimore, and have a tough defense. Then there's the Bengals, but after that, you've got Bears, Falcons, Commanders, Broncos, Giants are in there. I hope this isn't a move by a notoriously meddling owner to think, hey, we could sneak in the playoffs. They do not have a lot of talent on that team. Letting Andy Dalton play, we'll see them where their other holes are. Then maybe they can bring Bryce Young along slowly. Maybe he's trade bait, though I don't know what you get for him beyond like a mid to late round pick at this point. But it's astonishing to see how bad a pretty much consensus number one overall pick has fallen so quickly.
Yeah, and we have seen some, former high picks that have found their game in other places. You look at a Sam Darnold, who is off to a nice start right now with Minnesota, or Baker Mayfield with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So it is possible that Bryce Young can find his footing at some point down the road. Speaking of former Alabama quarterbacks, Tua Tagovailoa out with a concussion, a pretty nasty one that he suffered a week ago, of course, and is now on IR. The Dolphins have placed them there, and he's going to consult with some concussion specialists to work on a timetable for his return. It's not the first time that he has, of course, suffered an injury like this. Last week, Paul, there was a lot of people that were asking this man to retire. That doesn't seem to be the case as of right now, but what do you make of the whole situation?
Well, I think it's a brutal reminder of how tough this sport is, right? As if we haven't had enough reminders from players, whether they're taking their own life or players who have talked in detail about how difficult their life has been post-football once you have had injuries. We've seen this in hockey a lot too, as you know. It's nothing to be trifled of. You can see these athletes who think, I'm a warrior. I've wanted this all my life. I can fight through this. I just need to get my head clear. I found it a little unsavory how many people were calling for Tua to retire right away because he does not need that pressure on him. Personally, if I had suffered, the injury, when we saw this one, this was reminiscent to the second one he suffered 2 years ago, where we saw what they call the fencing position, where the hands are going in an involuntary direction. That's really troubling to see. You talk about his family, you talk about everything on the plate. There's no need to make a decision right now. I think the Dolphins did the right thing putting him on IR at least for 4 weeks. They can make a decision then. Personally, maybe it would be better if he took till the end of the season and then made a decision, but you need a lot of things to come into play for this, but ultimately it's his decision. I would hope the people close to him, coach, agent, family, all have a say in terms of how they feel he is and what his life is like after football. He's going to want to play. You know that this is the kind of player he's shown. He went through a tough time before, actually did training to learn how to fall, but it was very tough to watch and no one wants to see that again.
Yeah, I think a lot of people make it seem like it is an easy answer, but clearly it's a lot more complex than it is. Meanwhile, there's a bunch of teams 0-2 right now that definitely are not off to good starts, and the Ravens and Rams are right at the top of the list. Out of these two teams, which do you think is in bigger trouble here as we move forward?
It's a really tough question to answer. I'd say the Rams because of the injuries, right? Like the one thing with the Rams is, okay, the Cardinals are 1-1. But they looked so good last week. I think you can expect them to be a lot more competitive than people thought. The Seahawks are 2-0. Again, maybe looking a little better under Mike Macdonald. And then even though the 49ers are 1-1, had a surprising loss last week, the 49ers have a lot of quality. So the Rams, it doesn't look like they're going to be able to keep up. Their schedule's pretty weak, though. They've got the Bears, the Packers without Jordan Love, the Raiders, the Vikings. They got some and the Dolphins are in there as well, mixed in with the division games. So I'd look at the Rams schedule and say, I think they could maybe salvage this. But when I look at their injuries, it's brutal. They'd already lost Puka Nacua at least for 4 weeks. A lot of people are saying it's going to be longer. They lost Cooper Kupp last weekend. They're down Tyler Higbee. They've lost Steve Avila. Their offensive line is a mess. So I think because of the injuries, I think they're in tougher. But the Ravens don't have it easy at all. They're 0-2. High expectations. They lost a lot. Like losing Mike Macdonald was really big as their defensive coordinator. They also lost a couple of huge pieces off their offensive line, and you're seeing that in the way Lamar Jackson's being pressured consistently. But it makes for fascinating watching. They got the Cowboys this week. Which club is going to be in more of a crisis? Are we going to get a 1-2 Cowboys who got absolutely destroyed last week at home against New Orleans? If they lose 2 in a row at home, the pressure is going to be on Mike McCarthy. Or do the Ravens go 0-3? And then after the Cowboys, they've got the Bills, and then they've got the Bengals, and then they've got the Commanders in there, and then they've got the Buccaneers and the Browns. Like, that is a brutal schedule. If the Ravens go to 0-3 here against the Cowboys, staring at a Bills team that looks really damn good, that season, could you imagine? The reigning MVP was considered a huge upset that they lost to the Chiefs in the AFC Championship with the home advantage to start 0-3, 0-4, dare I say 0-5. Yeah, that's a massive story. So again, I think the schedule plays into this. I think the Rams are in a little more trouble just because they don't have the personnel, even with a softer schedule, to do it. But my goodness, the Ravens have a brutal schedule coming up, and it's going to be fun to watch those games every week just because it's such high stakes.
Well, there's a lot of talk every year about teams that start 0-2 and how unlikely they are to make the playoffs. So a real fork in the road moment for these teams heading into week number 3. As always, leave your thoughts in the comments section below. For Paul Chapman, I'm Rob Wong. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you next week.